Hello, my dear students of magic. It's Demian. Welcome back to the dormitory for another evening of shared parchment, ancient tales, and peaceful rest. Today we are diving into the extraordinary world of Rubeus Hagrid and his lifelong devotion to the most misunderstood, most magnificent, and often most dangerous creatures in the wizarding world. So settle in, get comfortable, let the weight of the day fade away, and allow yourself to be transported to a place where dragons soar through moonlit skies, where ancient forests whisper secrets, and where even the most fearsome beasts can show unexpected tenderness. This is a journey through Hagrid's history of dragons and magical creatures, told in a way that will carry you gently toward rest. Picture yourself now, sitting in a weathered armchair inside Hagrid's wooden hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. The fire crackles warmly in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The smell of wood smoke mingles with the faint scent of curing meats hanging from the rafters, and somewhere nearby, you can hear the gentle snoring of Fong, Hagrid's enormous boarhound, curled up on a patchwork rug. Outside, the night is calm and clear, with stars beginning to peek through the darkening sky above the treetops. The occasional hoot of an owl drifts through the window, and in the distance, you might catch the faint rustle of something moving through the undergrowth, something magical, something wonderful. Hagrid himself is here, of course, filling the small space with his enormous presence, his wild beard catching the firelight, his beetle-black eyes twinkling with warmth and kindness. He's preparing tea in a copper kettle that whistles softly on the fire, and as he settles his massive frame into a creaking wooden chair, he begins to speak in that familiar rumbling voice, full of affection for the creatures he's spent his entire life protecting and understanding. Tonight, he's going to share with you the stories of these remarkable beings, the dragons he's helped care for, the creatures he's befriended against all odds, and the lessons he's learned from a lifetime spent in the company of those most wizards fear. The air is thick with the comfort of this place, a sanctuary where the dangerous and the gentle exist side by side, where understanding bridges the gap between fear and friendship. As you listen to Hagrid's voice, let yourself sink deeper into relaxation, knowing that here, in this moment, you're safe and warm, surrounded by magic of the gentlest kind. Before we venture into the Forbidden Forest or soar alongside dragons, we must first understand the man who has made it his life's work to bridge the gap between wizards and the creatures they so often misunderstand. Rubeus Hagrid was born on the 6th of December in 1928, though the exact location has been lost to time, somewhere in the west country of England, near the Forest of Dean. His birth itself was unusual, the product of a union that defied the normal boundaries of the wizarding world. His father was a wizard, a man remembered as tiny and gentle, despite his magical abilities, while his mother was a giantess named Fridwulfa, a being of immense size and strength from a world that wizards had long viewed with suspicion and fear. From the very beginning, young Rubeus was different. By the age of 6, he already stood taller than his father, able to lift the small wizard with one hand and place him atop a dresser when he grew annoyed, a memory Hagrid would later recall with a mixture of fondness and sadness. His father loved him dearly, cherishing this enormous son with the wild hair and kind heart, teaching him what he could about magic and the wizarding world. But when Hagrid was only 3 years old, his mother returned to her giant colony, abandoning her family and leaving the young half-giant to be raised by his father alone. Hagrid would later say he barely remembered Fridwulfa, retaining only the vaguest impression of her presence, and he would frankly admit that she had not been a good mother. His father, on the other hand, remained in his memory as a figure of pure devotion, someone who accepted his unusual son without question or shame. Growing up in this way, caught between two worlds and fully belonging to neither, shaped Hagrid into the man he would become. He grew to a height of 11.5 feet, enormous by human standards but quite small for someone with giant blood. This size made him an outsider in most wizarding circles. someone to be stared at, sometimes feared, often dismissed. Yet it also gave him a unique perspective on the creatures that other wizards found monstrous. He understood what it meant to be judged for one's appearance, to be considered dangerous simply because of the way you looked. This empathy would become the foundation of his life's work. When Hagrid received his letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, his father was thrilled beyond measure. The small wizard saw it as validation that his son would have a place in the magical world, that despite his unusual heritage, Rubeus would be able to learn and grow alongside other young witches and wizards. In 1940, at the age of 11, Hagrid traveled to Hogwarts for the first time. The Sorting Hat placed him in Gryffindor House, recognizing in this oversized boy a courage and loyalty that would define his entire life. His wand, made of oak, 16 inches long and rather bendy, felt right in his enormous hands, a tool through which he could channel his magic and his dreams. But tragedy struck during Hagrid's second year. His beloved father passed away, leaving the young half-giant truly alone in the world. Dumbledore, who was then merely the Transfiguration professor, took a special interest in the grieving student, seeing in Hagrid a fundamental decency that transcended his intimidating appearance. This relationship would prove crucial when disaster struck in Hagrid's third year, an event that would alter the course of his entire life. The year was 1943, and the corridors of Hogwarts were gripped by fear. Someone had opened the legendary Chamber of Secrets, unleashing a monster that attacked Muggle-born students, leaving them petrified and terrified. The attacks culminated in the death of a student named Myrtle Warren, a tragedy that threatened to close the school forever. In the midst of this crisis, a fifth-year Slytherin student named Tom Marvolo Riddle, who would one day become Lord Voldemort, discovered that Hagrid was keeping a secret of his own. In a cupboard in the castle dungeons, young Hagrid was raising an acromantula, a giant spider he'd acquired as an egg and named Aragog. Hagrid loved the creature, seeing in this eight-eyed spider a friend rather than a monster, caring for it despite the obvious danger and the explicit rules against keeping such beasts. When Riddle discovered Aragog, he saw an opportunity. He himself had opened the chamber, releasing the basilisk that had killed Myrtle, but he needed someone to blame if he was to avoid punishment. And so he framed Hagrid, claiming that the acromantula was the monster from the chamber, that this oversized boy with his dangerous pet was responsible for the attacks. The evidence seemed damning. Hagrid was expelled immediately, his wand snapped in two by the Ministry of Magic as punishment for his supposed crimes. At 13 years old, he found himself cast out of the only home he'd known since his father's death. Labeled a danger to others, his magical education terminated. It was a devastating blow, one that might have broken a lesser person entirely. But Dumbledore, who suspected Hagrid's innocence and recognized the injustice being done, intervened. He convinced Headmaster Armando Dippet to allow Hagrid to remain at Hogwarts as the gamekeeper in training, giving the boy a place to live and a purpose to fulfill. And so, Hagrid stayed. But everything had changed. He kept the pieces of his broken wand, hiding them inside a pink umbrella that he would carry for the rest of his life, using it to perform magic when necessary despite the ban. He learned the grounds of Hogwarts intimately, every tree in the Forbidden Forest, every creature that called it home. He built his wooden hut on the edge of the forest, a simple structure that would become his sanctuary and his base of operations for decades to come. Where another person might have grown bitter, Hagrid's heart remained open, his capacity for love and compassion undimmed by the injustice he had suffered. Decades later, when the Chamber of Secrets was opened again during Harry Potter's second year, the truth finally came to light. It was revealed that Tom Riddle had been the real culprit, that Hagrid had been innocent all along, framed by a boy who would grow into the darkest wizard of the age. By then, it was far too late for Hagrid to return to formal magical education, but his name was cleared, and he was allowed to use magic openly once more, though he'd never been formally retrained. More importantly, he was vindicated in the eyes of those who mattered most to him. In 1993, Professor Sylvanus Kettleburn retired from his position as Care of Magical Creatures professor, and Albus Dumbledore, now headmaster, offered the post to Hagrid. It was a moment of profound validation. Hagrid, who had been denied a complete magical education, who had been expelled and disgraced, was now to teach students about the creatures he'd spent his life studying and protecting. His teaching methods were unconventional, to say the least. Where other professors might have started with flobberworms and gradually worked up to more dangerous creatures, Hagrid began his very first lesson with hippogriffs, proud and potentially lethal beings that required careful respect and proper etiquette. His later lessons would include blast-ended scroots, creatures so dangerous and poorly understood that even Hagrid himself wasn't entirely sure what they ate or how to control them. Some students found his classes terrifying, while others, particularly those with Gryffindor courage and Hufflepuff loyalty, came to treasure them. Hagrid's fundamental belief was that there was no such thing as a truly evil creature, only misunderstood ones. Every beast, no matter how dangerous its ministry classification, deserved respect and compassion. This philosophy led him to form bonds with creatures that other wizards wouldn't dare approach, to see potential for friendship in beings that most viewed only as threats. His home, that wooden hut on the forest's edge, reflected this philosophy perfectly. Inside, the enormous scrubbed table was often covered with textbooks on dragon breeding and creature care, alongside the more mundane necessities of daily life. A massive bed in the corner, piled with patchwork quilts, was large enough to accommodate his frame and occasionally a creature or two seeking comfort. The fireplace was always burning, the kettle always ready for tea, and visitors could expect to be offered rock cakes that were nearly inedible but made with such genuine affection that no one had the heart to refuse them. Dead ferrets might be found on the table, intended as treats for Buckbeak the hippogriff, and the scent of dog was ever present thanks to Fang's devotion to sleeping near the fire. This was Hagrid's world, a place where the line between wild and domestic blurred, where a three-headed dog named Fluffy could be considered a sweet pet, where spiders the size of elephants were friends rather than nightmares. It was a world born from empathy and fed by an endless capacity to see the good in even the most fearsome beings. And it was this world that he now shares with those willing to listen, to learn, and to see beyond their fears. Now, let us turn our attention to the creatures that have captured human imagination since time immemorial, the beings that soar through legends and breathe fire through ancient stories. Dragons. In the wizarding world, dragons are classified by the Ministry of Magic with 5 X's, the highest danger rating possible, designated as known wizard killer, impossible to train or domesticate. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of, this designation, Hagrid has always maintained a special fascination with these magnificent beasts. To understand Hagrid's relationship with dragons, we must first understand the dragons themselves, all 10 of the known pure-blooded breeds that inhabit our world. Let us begin with the Antipodean opali, native to the valleys of New Zealand, though they have been known to migrate to Australia. This dragon is widely considered the most beautiful of all the breeds, and it's easy to see why. Their scales shimmer with an iridescent pearly quality that seems to capture and reflect light in mesmerizing ways, giving them an appearance of otherworldly elegance. Their eyes, which give them their name, are perhaps their most distinctive feature. They have no pupils, instead displaying a glittering, multicolored surface that makes them appear almost like living opals. When they breathe fire, it comes out as a vivid scarlet flame, creating a stunning contrast against their pale bodies. These dragons typically weigh between 2 and 3 tons, making them medium-sized compared to other breeds. Unlike most dragons, which prefer mountainous regions, the opali makes its home in valleys, which has sometimes brought them into unfortunate proximity with human settlements. However, they are among the least aggressive of all dragon species, generally killing only when they need to feed. Their preferred prey is sheep, which they hunt with relatively little drama compared to their more violent cousins. Their eggs are pale gray and have often been mistaken by unknowing muggles for stones or even fossils, leading to some amusing incidents over the years when someone has tried to keep what they thought was an interesting rock, only to have it hatch into a dragon. One particularly notable incident occurred in Australia during the 1970s, when a male opali was blamed for killing a series of kangaroos. Magiozoologists believe this happened after the male was driven from his territory by a female opali, as females of this species tend to be the dominant gender. Forced to find new hunting grounds, the dragon adapted to local prey, demonstrating the intelligence and flexibility that characterizes even the supposedly simple dragon breeds. The Chinese fireball, also known as the lion dragon, is a creature of spectacular appearance and ancient mysticism. Native to China, this dragon is covered in smooth scarlet scales that seem to glow in certain lights, and its face is framed by a fringe of golden spikes that give it a distinctly leonine appearance. Its eyes are extremely prominent, giving it an intense, staring expression that can be quite unnerving. The name Fireball comes from the unique way these dragons breathe fire, rather than producing a stream of flames like most breeds. The Chinese Fireball shoots a mushroom-shaped blast of fire from its nostrils when angered, a spectacular display that has been compared to an explosion. The eggs of the Chinese Fireball are brilliant crimson in color, speckled with gold, and they are highly prized in Chinese wizardry. The shells, when powdered, have potent magical properties, and are used in various potions and spells, making them valuable enough that illegal trading in these eggs has been a persistent problem, despite ministry regulations. Victor Krum faced one of these magnificent creatures during the first task of the Tri-Wizard tournament in 1994. He used a conjunctivitis curse to blind the dragon temporarily, though this had the unfortunate side effect of causing the creature to step on and crush some of its own eggs in its confused state, resulting in a points penalty for Krum during the scoring of the task. The common Welsh green is exactly what its name suggests, common and green. Found throughout the lush mountains of Wales, this dragon blends in perfectly with the grass and foliage of its homeland, making it surprisingly difficult to spot despite its considerable size. It is one of the smaller dragon breeds, and its temperament is relatively docile as dragons go. The Welsh green prefers to make its meals of sheep and small mammals, generally avoiding human contact when possible. One of its most endearing qualities, if one can use such a word for a dragon, is its roar. Unlike the harsh, terrifying sounds made by most dragons, the Welsh green's roar is described as surprisingly musical and melodious, almost pleasant to hear. The eggs of the common Welsh green are earthy brown with green speckles, providing excellent camouflage when laid among the moss and soil of the Welsh mountains. This dragon's relatively peaceful nature has made it a symbol of Welsh magical heritage, and most Welsh wizarding families feel a certain pride in having such a comparatively gentle dragon as their national creature. However, this peaceful reputation was severely tested by the Ilfracombe incident of 1932, when a rogue Welsh green descended upon a beach full of Muggle holidaymakers. A family of wizards who happened to be vacationing at the same beach managed to prevent any deaths, but they were forced to perform what is still considered the largest mass memory charm operation of the 20th century, carefully erasing the memories of dozens of Muggles who had seen the dragon quite clearly. Fleur Delacour of Beaubaton faced a common Welsh green during the Tri-Wizard tournament, and she managed to entrance the creature into a magical sleep, allowing her to retrieve her golden egg without injury. However, the dragon woke prematurely, and in its confusion it managed to set fire to her skirt before she could retreat to safety. Still, she completed the task successfully, demonstrating that even a common dragon requires significant skill and courage to overcome. The Hebridean black inhabits the rocky Hebrides Islands off the coast of Scotland, and it is a far more aggressive creature than its Welsh cousin. Growing up to 30 feet in length, these dragons are characterized by their rough, dark scales and the ridge of razor-sharp spikes that runs down their spines. Their tails end in an arrow-shaped spike, a weapon as deadly as their fire, and their eyes are a brilliant, penetrating purple that seems to glow in the darkness. Each Hebridean black requires approximately 100 square miles of territory, a space they defend with fierce determination against any perceived intruders. The McFusty clan, a wizarding family native to the Hebrides, has traditionally taken responsibility for managing and concealing these dragons from Muggle attention. It's a dangerous job, one that requires constant vigilance and no small amount of courage. The Hebridean black feeds primarily on deer, which are plentiful in the Scottish Highlands, but they have been known to carry off large dogs and even cattle when deer are scarce. Their aggressive nature makes them unsuitable for even the limited amount of training that some dragon species can endure, and approaching one requires extreme caution and, ideally, several other trained dragonologists as backup. The Hungarian horntail is widely regarded as the most dangerous of all dragon breeds, a reputation it has earned through centuries of violent encounters with wizards brave or foolish enough to approach one. These dragons have the appearance of massive black lizards, with bronze horns jutting from their heads and long tails bristling with bronze spikes. Their eyes are a striking yellow, reflecting light in the darkness like those of a great cat. The horntail possesses the longest fire-breathing range of any dragon species, capable of shooting flames up to 50 feet, hot enough to melt stone and certainly hot enough to kill a wizard instantly. The eggs of the Hungarian horntail are cement gray with extremely hard shells, harder than those of any other breed. Interestingly, the hatchlings use their tails to break through the shell when it's time to emerge, rather than using a tooth on their snout as most dragon species do. This early demonstration of their tail weaponry is a sign of the formidable creature they will become. Harry Potter faced a Hungarian horntail during the first task of the Tri-Wizard tournament, in what is still considered one of the most dangerous challenges ever set for the competition. Harry used his firebolt broomstick to outmaneuver the dragon, playing to his strengths as a flyer, and managed to retrieve the golden egg while avoiding the creature's fire and spikes. It was a harrowing experience, one that left spectators breathless and cemented Harry's reputation for courage. The Norwegian Ridgeback resembles the Hungarian horntail in many ways, but with some key differences. Rather than tail, spikes, the Ridgeback has prominent jet black ridges running along its back, giving it a distinctive silhouette. These dragons are known for developing their fire-breathing abilities earlier than other breeds, with hatchlings capable of breathing fire within just a few weeks of emerging from their eggs. The eggs themselves are deep black, darker even than the dragon's ridges. Norwegian Ridgebacks are known to hunt both on land and in water, making them versatile predators. One famous report from 1802 claims that a Ridgeback carried off a whale calf from the coast of Norway, though this account has never been definitively verified. Hagrid's personal experience with a Norwegian Ridgeback is well documented, though it ended in heartbreak. One evening in 1991, Hagrid was playing cards at the Hog's Head pub in Hogsmeade, when a hooded stranger offered him a dragon egg. The stranger, whom Hagrid later learned was actually Professor Quirrell in disguise, claimed to have won the egg in a game of chance and was willing to part with it for a reasonable price. Hagrid, who had always dreamed of raising a dragon, couldn't resist. He took the egg home and placed it in the fire to incubate, following the instructions in a very old copy of Dragon Breeding for Pleasure and Profit. When the egg hatched, Hagrid named the baby dragon Norbert, unaware that the creature was actually female. He fed Norbert a bucket of brandy mixed with chicken blood every half hour, as the book recommended, and watched with pride as the dragon grew at an astonishing rate. Within a week, Norbert had tripled in size and was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The dragon had a tendency to bite, and both Hagrid and Ron Weasley suffered injuries from her enthusiastic but painful displays of affection. When it became clear that keeping a rapidly growing dragon in a wooden hut was unsustainable, Harry, Ron, and Hermione helped arrange for Norbert to be transported to Romania, where Charlie Weasley worked at a dragon reserve. Charlie later informed Hagrid that Norbert was actually female, a fact that should have been obvious from her particularly aggressive behavior, and suggested the name Norberta instead. Hagrid still speaks of Norberta with obvious affection, though he accepts that sending her to the reserve was the right decision. The Peruvian Vipertooth is the smallest of all the dragon breeds, reaching only about 15 feet in length, and it is also the fastest flyer, capable of incredible aerial maneuvers. These dragons are copper-colored with black ridge markings running along their bodies, and they have short horns that, while less impressive than those of larger breeds, are still formidable weapons. What makes the Vipertooth particularly dangerous, however, are its fangs. It is the only dragon breed to possess venomous teeth, adding a toxic threat to its already formidable fire and claws. Worse still, the Vipertooth has developed a notorious and specific craving for human flesh. In the late 19th century, as the Vipertooth population grew rapidly, the International Confederation of Wizards was forced to send extermination squads to Peru to reduce their numbers. The dragons were killing so many people, both wizards and muggles, that they posed a genuine threat to the international statute of secrecy. Even today, after those drastic measures, the Vipertooth is considered one of the most dangerous creatures in existence, and encountering one in the wild is almost certainly fatal without significant magical protection and skill. Their eggs are blue with copper accents, beautiful to look at but deadly to pursue. The Romanian Longhorn is a powerful, bulky dragon with dark green scales and two long, glittering golden horns that can grow to impressive lengths. These horns are not merely for show. The Longhorn prefers to use them as weapons, goring its prey before finishing them off with flame or teeth. The horns are also highly valuable as a potion ingredient. When ground to powder, Longhorn horn is prized for its magical properties and commands high prices on the black market. This commercial value nearly drove the species to extinction, as poachers hunted the dragons specifically for their horns, killing them in numbers that the population could not sustain. In response to this crisis, the wizarding world established a breeding program in Romania, which has since become the world's most important dragon research and conservation center. Dragons from all breeds are studied there, and dragonologists from around the world come to Romania to learn and work. Charlie Weasley, Ron's brother, is one of these dragonologists, and his letters home often describe the challenging but rewarding work of caring for these magnificent, dangerous creatures. The Romanian Longhorn population has slowly recovered thanks to these efforts, though they remain carefully protected by international law. The Swedish short snout is covered in beautiful silvery blue scales that seem to shimmer in the light, and its skin is highly sought after for the manufacture of protective gloves and shields. The scales of a Swedish short snout can deflect many spells, making items crafted from them extremely valuable for those who work in dangerous magical professions. These dragons inhabit the wild, uninhabited, mountainous regions of Sweden, far from human civilization, which has resulted in fewer recorded attacks than most other species. However, this does not make them any less dangerous when encountered. The fire produced by a Swedish short snout is distinctive, a brilliant blue flame that burns hotter than the fire of almost any other dragon breed. This flame is chemically different from normal fire, capable of reducing timber and bone to ash in mere seconds. The eggs of the Swedish short snout match their parents' coloring, appearing silvery blue with a faint shimmer. Cedric Diggory faced a Swedish short snout during the Triwizard Tournament, and he used a clever tactic. He transfigured a rock into a dog, which distracted the dragon long enough for him to snatch the golden egg. However, even with this distraction, the dragon managed to burn him before he could get clear, leaving him with injuries that required immediate medical attention. Finally, we come to the Ukrainian Ironbelly, the largest of all known dragon breeds. These massive creatures can weigh up to 6 tons and often stand on their rear legs, towering over everything around them. Their scales are metallic gray, incredibly tough and resistant to magic, and their eyes are a deep red, like pools of blood. While they are slower in flight than smaller breeds, their immense size and strength make them devastating in combat. They can crush entire buildings simply by landing on them, and their claws are as long as a man's arm. One particularly sad example of a Ukrainian ironbelly lived deep beneath Gringotts Bank, where it guarded the highest security vaults for many years. This poor creature had been tortured by the goblins who employed it, trained through pain to respond to specific sounds called clankers. When it heard these noise-making tools, the dragon would retreat, having learned to associate the sound with agony. Years of living underground, far from sunlight and fresh air, had taken their toll. The dragon's scales had turned pale and flaky, losing their natural metallic sheen, and its eyes had faded from their natural deep red to a milky pink, likely from cataracts or light deprivation. In 1998, during their desperate mission to retrieve a Horcrux from the Lestrange vault, Harry, Ron, and Hermione released this captive dragon. They rode on its back as it burst up through the bank and into the London sky, a moment of liberation for a creature that had known only darkness and pain for so long. The dragon flew until it reached open water, where Harry, Ron, and Hermione were forced to let go and plunge into the lake below. What became of the dragon afterward is not entirely known, though it is hoped that it found its way to freedom, perhaps eventually reaching one of the dragon reserves where it could live out its days in the sunshine it had been denied for so long. These, then, are the 10 great breeds of dragons that inhabit our world. Each is unique, each is dangerous, and each is deserving of respect and, in Hagrid's view, compassion. While the Ministry classifies them all as sex creatures, impossible to train or domesticate, Hagrid has always maintained that this says more about wizards' lack of patience and understanding than it does about the dragons themselves. After all, he raised Norberta successfully, at least until she grew too large to remain in his hut. And while his attempt at keeping a dragon was technically illegal and ultimately unsuccessful, it demonstrated something important. That with enough care, enough respect, and enough love, even the fiercest creatures might show a gentler side. Now let us turn our attention to the creatures that have shared Hagrid's life most intimately, the animals and beings that he has cared for personally, often against considerable opposition and sometimes against the law itself. These are not just creatures to Hagrid. They are friends, family, companions who have taught him as much as he has taught them. Their stories reveal the depth of his compassion and the strength of his convictions. We begin with Fluffy, whose very name is a testament to Hagrid's unique perspective on dangerous creatures. Fluffy is a 3-headed dog, a creature of Greek mythology brought to life in the wizarding world. Hagrid purchased Fluffy from a Greek man in a pub in 1990, drawn to the creature despite, or perhaps because of, its fearsome appearance. Each of Fluffy's 3 heads has its own personality, its own preferences, though all 3 share a common weakness: music. When exposed to any kind of melody, whether from a harp or a simple wooden flute, Fluffy falls into an immediate, deep sleep, his 3 heads drooping as the music works its magic on him. Hagrid kept Fluffy in his hut for a time, though one can only imagine how the enormous dog fit into that small space. When Professor Dumbledore needed a guardian for the Philosopher's Stone in Harry's first year, Hagrid lent Fluffy for the task. The dog proved to be an excellent guardian, terrifying anyone who stumbled into the 3rd-floor corridor where he was stationed. His growls echoed through the castle, and the sight of 3 pairs of rolling eyes and 3 sets of enormous teeth was enough to send most people running. After the events surrounding the stone, Fluffy was released into the Forbidden Forest, where he still roams to this day. Hagrid visits him occasionally, bringing treats and playing music for him, and Fluffy seems perfectly content in his forest home, though Hagrid still refers to him as his little. fluffy with obvious affection. Aragog's story is both beautiful and tragic, a testament to the bonds that can form across species when fear is set aside. Hagrid acquired Aragog as an egg from a mysterious traveler when he was only a boy, probably around 12 years old. The egg hatched into a small acromantula, a giant spider with 8 eyes and the ability to speak human language. Most people would have destroyed such a creature immediately, but Hagrid saw only a baby in need of care. He kept Aragog hidden in a cupboard in the Hogwarts dungeons, feeding him scraps from meals and teaching him to speak, forming a bond that would last for more than 50 years. When Hagrid was expelled and forced to release Aragog into the Forbidden Forest to save him from being destroyed, the spider survived and eventually found a mate, a female acromantula named Mosag. Together, they founded a colony that grew to contain hundreds of giant spiders, creating a vast network of webs deep in the darkest. Part of the forest, Aragog maintained his loyalty to Hagrid throughout his long life, forbidding his children from harming the half-giant and considering him a true friend. However, as Aragog admitted when Harry and Ron visited him in their second year, he could not deny his children fresh meat when it wanders so freely into their territory, and only Hagrid's presence had saved the boys from being devoured. Aragog lived to a great age for an acromantula, finally passing away in April of 1997. Hagrid was devastated by the loss, and Harry, Hermione, and Professor Slughorn attended the funeral Hagrid held near his hut. They buried Aragog with dignity, and Slughorn collected some of the spider's venom, which is extremely valuable for potion making. Hagrid poured out some of his best oak-matured mead in tribute, and later that night, after several more glasses, he spoke at length about his old friend, remembering the young spider who had trusted a young boy so many decades ago. Even now, Aragog's descendants remain in the Forbidden Forest, a living legacy of that extraordinary friendship. Buckbeak, or Witherwings as he's sometimes known, is perhaps the creature most closely associated with Hagrid in the minds of those who attended Hogwarts during the 1990s. Buckbeak is a hippogriff, a magnificent creature that is half eagle and half horse, with the proud head, wings, and front legs of a great bird, and the body and hind legs of a horse. His feathers are a stormy gray color, his eyes are a brilliant orange, and his talons are razor sharp and half a foot long. Hippogriffs are intensely proud creatures, and approaching one requires careful etiquette. One must bow low and maintain eye contact, waiting for the hippogriff to bow in return. Only when this mutual respect has been established is it safe to approach, and if one is fortunate, to fly with the creature. Hagrid introduced Buckbeak to his third-year care of magical creatures class in 1993, and Harry Potter was the first student brave enough to approach him. When Buckbeak bowed back to Harry, Hagrid was nearly overcome with pride and excitement, lifting Harry onto Buckbeak's back for a flight around the paddock. It was a beautiful moment, one that demonstrated what Hagrid had always believed, that with respect and proper conduct, even the most dangerous creatures would respond with grace and friendship. Unfortunately, Draco Malfoy failed to pay attention to Hagrid's instructions. After Harry's successful flight, Draco approached Buckbeak with bravado rather than respect, calling him an ugly great brute. Buckbeak, deeply offended by this insult, slashed Draco's arm with his talons, inflicting a wound that, while not life-threatening, was certainly painful. Draco's father, Lucius Malfoy, seized upon this incident to attack Hagrid, using his influence at the Ministry to have Buckbeak sentenced to death. The Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, under pressure from Lucius, ruled that Buckbeak must be executed, and an executioner named Walden McNair was sent to carry out the sentence. Hagrid was heartbroken, spending hours preparing his appeal and trying to save his beloved hippogriff, but the system was stacked against him. On the day of the planned execution, however, Harry and Hermione, using a time turner, managed to rescue Buckbeak from the pumpkin patch where he was tethered. They flew him to the castle tower where Sirius Black was being held, and Sirius escaped on Buckbeak's back, the two fugitives vanishing into the night. Later, when Sirius inherited number 12, Grimmauld Place, Buckbeak lived there with him, staying in the upstairs bedroom that had belonged to Sirius's mother. After Sirius's death, Harry inherited Buckbeak, and on Dumbledore's advice, he gave the hippogriff to Hagrid to care for. As a precaution, they changed Buckbeak's name to Witherwings, though Dumbledore noted that it was unlikely anyone at the Ministry would remember or care about a hippogriff they'd tried to execute years before. Buckbeak has lived with Hagrid ever since, sleeping in his hut and occasionally being fed dead ferrets, which he consumes with gusto, sometimes spitting the bones onto Hagrid's pillow in what might be interpreted as either affection or a lack of table manners. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Buckbeak fought bravely, attacking Voldemort's giants and helping defend the school. He survived the battle and remains with Hagrid to this day, a living reminder of justice delayed but finally achieved. The Thestral herd that lives in the Forbidden Forest represents another of Hagrid's greatest accomplishments. Thestrals are winged horses with skeletal black bodies, reptilian faces, and leathery wings like those of a bat. Their eyes are white and shining, pupilless and eerie in the darkness. They have one unique and troubling characteristic. They can only be seen by those who have witnessed death and truly understood its meaning. To those who cannot see them, Thestrals are completely invisible, leading to centuries of superstition and fear. Many wizards consider them to be bad omens, harbingers of death, creatures to be avoided at all costs. Hagrid knows better. He has trained and bred the only domesticated herd of Thestrals in Britain, possibly in all of Europe, and he understands their true nature. Thestrals are gentle, loyal, and incredibly intelligent. They are carnivorous, feeding on meat, and Hagrid often brings them carcasses to eat. But they pose no threat to humans who treat them with respect. The herd began with a male and 5 females, and the first Thestral born in the Forbidden Forest was named Tenebris, Hagrid's special favorite. Over the years, the herd has grown, and they serve an important purpose at Hogwarts. They pull the carriages that transport students from the train station to the castle at the beginning and end of each term. For students who cannot see Thestrals, the carriages appear to move on their own, pulled by invisible forces. For those who can see them, the sight can be initially frightening, these skeletal creatures emerging from the darkness. But Hagrid teaches his students the truth. Thestrals are not death omens. They are simply misunderstood. They have an amazing sense of direction and will take you wherever you need to go if you trust them. During Harry's 5th year, he and several other students rode Thestrals all the way from Hogwarts to London, a journey of hundreds of miles. And the creatures never faltered or lost their way. During the Battle of Hogwarts, the Thestrals charged at Voldemort's giants, fighting fiercely to defend the school. They were brave and loyal to the end, and afterward, there were many more students who could see them, a sad reminder of the price of war. Finally, we cannot discuss Hagrid's creatures without mentioning Fang, who is, in some ways, the most important of them all. Fang is a boarhound, a large dog with a drooping, melancholy face and an unfortunate tendency to drool. Unlike Fluffy, Aragog, Buckbeak, or the Thestrals, Fang is not particularly magical, nor is he dangerous or misunderstood. He is, in Hagrid's own words, a bloody coward, likely to run and hide at the first sign of trouble. But Fang is constant. He is always there, sleeping on his rug by the fire, following Hagrid on his walks through the forest, providing companionship without a judgment or complication. When Hagrid is sad, Fang is there. When students visit the hut, Fang greets them with enthusiastic, slobbery affection. He may not be brave or fierce, but he is loyal and loving. And in many ways, that makes him the perfect companion for someone who spends his life caring for creatures that most people fear. These creatures, and many others, have shaped Hagrid's life and philosophy. They have taught him patience, compassion, and the value of looking beyond appearances. They have shown him that friendship can exist in the most unexpected places, and that fear often blinds us to beauty. In caring for them, Hagrid has found purpose and meaning, and in return, they have given him a richness of experience that few wizards could match. The Forbidden Forest itself deserves our attention now, for it is not merely a backdrop to Hagrid's work, but a living ecosystem, a vast and complex world that exists at the edge of civilization. The forest is ancient, far older than Hogwarts Castle, and it has been home to magical creatures for longer than anyone can remember. Its borders are marked but not fully mapped, for the forest itself seems to resist complete understanding, its paths shifting, its depths holding secrets that even Hagrid has not fully uncovered. The trees that make up the forest are primarily ancient specimens, towering oaks whose branches spread like umbrellas, blocking out much of the sunlight, beeches with smooth gray bark, pines that fill the air with their sharp scent, sycamores whose seeds spiral down in the autumn, and yews, some of which may be thousands of years old. The forest floor is covered with knotgrass that tangles around ankles, thorny brambles that catch at clothes, and a thick layer of dead leaves that muffle footsteps. In some places, the undergrowth is so dense that it's almost impossible to walk, while in others, clear paths seem to open naturally, though following them without knowing where they lead can be dangerous. The atmosphere of the Forbidden Forest is unlike anywhere else at Hogwarts. Even on the brightest day, the thick canopy creates a perpetual twilight within the trees, and the deeper one goes, the darker it becomes. Sounds are strange in the forest. The snap of a twig can seem deafening in the silence, while the rustling of leaves might disguise the approach of something much larger. At night, the forest comes alive with movement and sound, the calls of owls mixing with stranger noises, the padding of unseen feet, the occasional roar or scream of some creature deep in the darkness. It is a place of magic in its purest, wildest form, untamed by human hands. The Acromantula colony that Aragog founded has become one of the forest's most significant and dangerous features. After Aragog's death, his children and grandchildren continue to thrive in their web-covered hollow in the very heart of the forest. There are hundreds of them now, possibly thousands, ranging from newly hatched spiderlings to massive adults whose leg spans reach 15 feet or more. The colony lives in a dome-shaped area where the trees are draped with thick webs, creating an almost otherworldly landscape that catches morning mist and moonlight in beautiful but ominous ways. What do they eat? This question troubles anyone who thinks about it too carefully. A colony of hundreds of giant spiders, each the size of a small elephant, requires an enormous amount of food. They undoubtedly hunt the forest deer population, catching the animals in their webs or running them down with their surprising speed. They eat foxes, badgers, any small mammals they can catch. When their own kind die, they consume the bodies, wasting nothing. And as Aragog admitted to Harry and Ron, they would eat humans if given the opportunity, though Hagrid's presence in the forest has always protected visitors from this fate. The colony is dangerous, undeniably so, but it is also part of the forest's ecosystem now, playing its role in the complex web of life and death. The centaur herd represents another significant population in the forest, though their relationship with Hogwarts has been complicated and sometimes strained. Centaurs are not beasts. They are beings with intelligence equal to humans, capable of complex thought, philosophy, and magic. They have chosen to be classified as beasts by the Ministry, not because they lack intelligence, but because they refuse to be grouped with creatures like hags and vampires, whom they view with disdain. They live deep in the forest in a society of their own, with their own laws and customs, and they prefer to remain separate from human affairs. The centaurs that Hagrid has known over the years include Ronan, Bane, Megorian, and Firenze. Most maintain a cordial but distant relationship with him, respecting his care for the forest even if they don't always agree with his methods or his decisions. They spend their nights studying the stars, reading portents in the movements of planets and constellations, speaking in cryptic phrases about what they see in the heavens. Mars is bright tonight, they might say, a warning about war and bloodshed that they express but rarely act upon. When Hagrid brought Grop, his giant half-brother, to live in the forest in 1995, the centaurs were outraged, viewing it as an intrusion and a violation of their territory. Their relationship with Hagrid became strained, and even now, there is a wariness between them. Firenze, however, broke with the herd when he agreed to teach divination at Hogwarts during Harry's 5th year. The other centaurs viewed this as betraying their kind, lowering himself to teach humans as if he were their servant. They attacked Firenze in the forest, and he was only saved by Hagrid's intervention. The centaurs called Firenze a common mule for having allowed Harry Potter to ride him in Harry's 1st year, and they banished him from the herd. Yet, Firenze maintained that he had done the right thing, that there are times when the noble must help the less fortunate, regardless of the cost to pride. His story is a reminder that even in the magical world, prejudice and rigid social structures can create conflict and suffering. The forest is also home to unicorns, though they are rarely seen and deeply shy. These pure white horses with their spiraling horns embody innocence and purity, and killing one is considered one of the darkest acts possible in the wizarding world. Unicorn blood will keep someone alive even if they are inches from death. But the price is terrible. One who has slain such an innocent creature and drunk its blood will live only a half-life, cursed from the moment the blood touches their lips. Hagrid knows where the unicorns can sometimes be found, in moonlit glades where they gather, and he protects their privacy fiercely, allowing only the most trusted students to approach them under his supervision. Bowtruckles? Small tree-dwelling creatures that resemble walking sticks, live in the branches of certain trees, particularly those whose wood is useful for wand making. They are peaceful unless their tree is threatened, at which point they will attack with surprising ferocity, using their long sharp fingers to gouge at eyes. Hagrid has a particular fondness for bowtruckles, appreciating their loyalty to their homes and their willingness to defend what they love. There are wolves in the forest as well, though not the kind one might expect. These are not werewolves, despite rumors to the contrary, but the offspring of werewolves who mated in wolf form. They possess the intelligence of humans and the majesty of wolves, but none of the bloodlust that makes transformed werewolves so dangerous. They live in packs deep in the forest, hunting in coordination and living by their own code. Dumbledore allowed them to remain in the forest, recognizing that they deserved a safe place to exist. And then there are the Thestrals, of course, and the occasional giant seeking refuge, and countless other creatures that make brief appearances or hide in the deepest shadows. The forest is, in essence, a sanctuary for anything magical that cannot safely exist in the wider world. It is Hagrid's domain, the place where he is most at home, where he can walk alone at night without fear, where every sound and scent is familiar to him. It is a place of danger, yes, but also of wonder. And Hagrid has spent his life ensuring that it remains that way. A wild place where magic thrives beyond the reach of those who would seek to control or destroy it. There is one creature that Hagrid bred himself, one that represents perhaps his most controversial and certainly his most scientifically dubious achievement: the blast-ended Scroot. In the autumn of 1994, at the beginning of his 2nd year as a professor, Hagrid presented his 4th year Care of Magical Creatures class with several hundred newly hatched creatures that he had bred himself. They looked, in Harry's words, like deformed, shell-less lobsters, horribly pale and slimy looking, with legs sticking out in very odd places and no visible heads. They were about 6 inches long, crawling over one another in their crates, and they gave off a powerful smell of rotting fish. Sparks flew from their rear ends periodically, propelling them forward a few inches with a sound like "phut." The blast-ended Scroot was, and is, a clear violation of the ban on experimental breeding, a law passed by the Ministry of Magic in 1965. This law, drafted by Newt Scamander himself, makes it illegal to create new species of magical creatures without explicit permission from the Ministry. Hagrid never received such permission, and his breeding of the Scroots should have resulted in serious legal consequences. However, no charges were ever brought, possibly because Dumbledore intervened, or possibly because the Ministry was too preoccupied with the Triwizard Tournament to pursue the matter. There's also speculation that Hagrid was given tacit approval to breed the creatures specifically for use in the tournament's third task, though this has never been confirmed. What exactly are blast-ended scroots? Magizoological analysis suggests they are a hybrid created by crossing two distinct species, the manticore and the fire crab. The manticore is a X class creature with near-human intelligence, a human head, a lion's body, and a scorpion's tail equipped with a lethal sting. The fire crab, while less dangerous, is a large turtle-like creature with a jeweled shell that can shoot flames from its rear end. By somehow breeding these two vastly different creatures, Hagrid created something entirely new and unpredictable. The developmental stages of the scroots were fascinating from a biological standpoint, if deeply concerning from a safety perspective. At birth, they were 6 inches long and possessed no obvious means of feeding, as they had no mouths. Hagrid attempted to determine what they would eat by offering them various foods: ant eggs, frog livers, grass snakes. Nothing seemed to work, and the creatures appeared to survive without eating, which should have been impossible. By November, 2 months after their birth, the surviving scroots had grown to 3 feet in length and had developed a gray, shiny armor that began to cover their pale bodies. Their temperaments had become explosively violent, and they were so aggressive toward one another that Hagrid had to separate them into individual crates to prevent them from killing each other, which they did with alarming frequency. Sexual dimorphism became apparent as they matured. The males developed scorpion-like stingers that curled over their backs, capable of injecting a painful if not lethal poison. The females developed suckers on their abdomens, which they used to drain blood from their prey. Both sexes retained their ability to shoot fire from one end of their body, though since they had no visible heads, it was often difficult to determine which end was which until flames or a stinger appeared. By December, they had reached 6 feet in length and showed no signs of stopping their growth. The students in Hagrid's class were, understandably, less than enthusiastic about caring for these creatures. Draco Malfoy summed up the general sentiment when he asked sarcastically, "I can certainly see why we're trying to keep them alive. Who wouldn't want pets that can burn, sting, and bite all at once?" Hagrid took this criticism personally, becoming defensive about his scroots and insisting that they were misunderstood. He even tried to see if they would hibernate, providing them with teddy bears to encourage them to settle down for winter. They did not hibernate. They simply continued to grow and become more dangerous. By June of 1995, when they were used in the third task of the Triwizard Tournament, the scroots were 10 feet long and looked like giant scorpions. Only 1 or 2 had survived the year, the rest having killed each other or died from unknown causes. Harry encountered one in the maze and discovered that their armor was so thick that most spells simply bounced off it. The only vulnerable spot was the soft, unarmored underbelly, and Harry only managed to defeat it by using an impediment curse on that specific area. The creature's explosive fire propulsion made it incredibly fast and unpredictable, and its combination of stinger, sucker, fire, and armored body made it one of the most dangerous creatures Harry had ever faced. What happened to the last surviving scroot after the tournament is unclear. Hagrid may have released it into the Forbidden Forest, where it presumably either died or found some way to survive. Alternatively, he may have kept it for breeding purposes, hoping to create a more stable version of the species. Some have suggested that the entire breeding program was a disaster that should never have been attempted, while others argue that Hagrid's willingness to experiment and his desire to create something new, even if dangerous, represents the kind of bold thinking that advances magical knowledge. Either way, the blast-ended scroot remains one of the most controversial creatures in modern magical history, and a testament to Hagrid's unique approach to creature care. To understand how the wizarding world categorizes the incredible diversity of magical creatures, we must turn our attention to the Ministry of Magic's classification system. the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures has developed a rating scale that assigns creatures a value from 1x to 5x's, based on their danger level and the difficulty of handling them. This system, while useful, is not perfect, and Hagrid has his own opinions about its limitations and occasional unfairness. The lowest rating, X, is designated for creatures that are considered boring. The flobberworm holds this distinction, a 10-inch brownish worm that does almost nothing of interest. It moves very slowly, prefers damp conditions, and eats lettuce and most vegetation. Students in care of magical creatures classes often groan when flobberworms are the subject of study, as there is truly very little to say about them. They are completely harmless and utterly uninteresting, which in Hagrid's view is a terrible injustice. He believes that every creature has something fascinating about it if one looks closely enough, but even he must admit that flobberworms test this philosophy. The XX rating is for creatures that are harmless or maybe domesticated. These are the creatures that wizards might keep as pets, or that pose minimal danger even to someone with little magical knowledge. The augury, or Irish phoenix as it's sometimes called, holds this rating. Auguries are shy birds whose mournful cry was once thought to predict death but is actually just a signal that rain is coming. They can be kept in aviaries and, despite their somewhat unsettling appearance and melancholy calls, they pose no threat. The Krupp, a wizard-bred dog with a forked tail, is also XX rated. Krupps are intensely loyal to wizards but extremely aggressive toward muggles, which is why they must be kept carefully hidden from non-magical folk. The XXX rating indicates competent wizards should cope. These are creatures that require some knowledge and skill to handle safely but aren't inherently lethal. The Gnarl, which looks like a hedgehog but is far more aggressive, falls into this category, as do pixies. Those small blue troublemakers that can cause chaos in a classroom but are easily controlled with the right spell. The Hippocampus, a horse with the hindquarters of a giant fish, is XXX rated despite being relatively gentle, simply because handling it requires understanding of both equine and aquatic creature care. Even Thestrals might be considered XXX by someone who has the knowledge and respect needed to work with them, though the Ministry officially rates them higher due to their association with death. The XXX rating is for creatures that are dangerous and require specialist knowledge, or that only a skilled wizard may handle. This is where we find most of Hagrid's favorite creatures. Hippogriffs are XXX because, while they can be tamed and even ridden by those who show proper respect, they will attack without hesitation if insulted or threatened, and their talons are deadly. The Sphinx, with its riddles and its tendency to devour those who answer incorrectly, is XXX for obvious reasons. Unicorns, despite being gentle, are rated XXX because approaching them requires great delicacy and respect, and the consequences of harming one are severe both legally and magically. Even Thestrals are officially rated XXX by the Ministry, which views them as dangerous creatures, though Hagrid vehemently disagrees with this assessment. Interestingly, creatures are not rated XXX only because they're dangerous to humans. Some receive this rating because they're rare and require specialist knowledge to care for properly, or because they're dangerous in the sense that they could easily be harmed by improper handling. The Ministry's classifications are meant to protect both wizards and creatures, though Hagrid would argue they often lean too heavily toward protecting wizards at the expense of the creatures' reputations. Finally, we come to the XXX rating, reserved for creatures that are known wizard killers, or impossible to train or domesticate. This is the highest danger rating, and creatures with 5 X's are generally considered completely unmanageable. All dragon breeds receive this rating regardless of their individual temperaments, because even the most docile dragon can kill a wizard without meaning to, and no dragon has ever been truly tamed in the way that a hippogriff, or even a thestral might be. Basilisks, the legendary serpents of Slytherin, are X because their stare kills instantly and they grow to enormous size. Acromantulas are X because they actively hunt humans and possess venom that can kill within minutes. The Nundu, a gigantic leopard-like beast from East Africa whose breath carries disease, is so dangerous that it is said to require at least 100 wizards working together to subdue one. The Manticore, with its human head, lion body, and scorpion tail, is XXX because it has human intelligence and actively uses it to hunt wizards and muggles alike. The Leatherfold, a creature that resembles a black cloak and suffocates its victims while they sleep, is XXX because only a Patronus charm can drive it away. And by the time most people realize they're being attacked, it's already too late. Hagrid has always maintained that these classifications, while useful for general guidance, fail to capture the complexity and individuality of creatures. He points out that some XXX creatures, like acromantulas, can form genuine friendships with humans, as he demonstrated with Aragog. He notes that dragons can be raised from eggs and, while never truly domesticated, can at least be managed by those with the right combination of knowledge, courage, and respect. He argues that even a basilisk can be controlled by a Parselmouth, proving that no creature is truly impossible to train under all circumstances. On the other hand, Hagrid acknowledges that some XX creatures can be far more troublesome than their rating suggests. Pixies, for example, caused absolute chaos when Professor Lockhart released them in a classroom, and it took considerable effort to recapture them all. A Kroot might be rated harmless to wizards, but it's extremely dangerous to muggles, and keeping one requires constant vigilance. The classifications, in Hagrid's view, should be taken as guidelines, rather than absolute truths. Every creature is an individual, and understanding them requires spending time with them, learning their habits and temperaments, seeing beyond the label the Ministry has assigned. Ron Weasley once added a humorous note to Harry's copy of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, writing on the classification page that XX means anything Hagrid likes. There's truth in that joke. Hagrid has always been drawn to the creatures others fear, seeing in them not danger but opportunity, not threats but friends waiting to be understood. This perspective has gotten him into trouble more than once, but it has also allowed him to achieve things that more cautious magiozoologists never would have attempted. As we move toward the close of our journey tonight, let us consider the broader picture of magical creature conservation and the role that people like Hagrid play in ensuring these magnificent beings continue to exist. The wizarding world has not always been kind to magical creatures. Throughout history, many species have been hunted to the brink of extinction, either for their valuable body parts, because they were considered dangerous, or simply because they were poorly understood. The golden snidget, a tiny golden bird once used in Quidditch games, was nearly wiped out by overhunting before wizards created the golden snitch as a replacement and established sanctuaries to protect the remaining birds. The Romanian longhorn, as we've discussed, was nearly lost due to poachers seeking their valuable horns. The graphorn, a large purple creature with 2 horns, was hunted so extensively for its horn, hide, and the graphorn hair used in potions that it was considered extinct in the wild for many years, though recent conservation efforts have begun to rebuild the population. Modern magiozoologists have worked tirelessly to protect endangered species and to educate wizards about the importance of treating magical creatures with respect rather than fear. Chief among these advocates was Newt Scamander, whose book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them became required reading at Hogwarts and established the foundation for modern creature care. Scamander traveled the world in the 1920s, documenting creatures and arguing for their protection. He worked with the Ministry of Magic to establish laws protecting endangered species and to create the dragon reserves that now exist around the world. These dragon reserves, particularly the one in Romania, where Charlie Weasley works, serve multiple purposes. They provide safe habitats where dragons can live without threatening muggles or being hunted by wizards. They allow magiozoologists to study dragon behavior, breeding patterns, and health in controlled but relatively natural settings. They serve as educational centers where future dragonologists can learn their craft. And they act as conservation centers where endangered dragon breeds can be protected and, when necessary, bred to increase their populations. Similar sanctuaries exist for other creatures. There are unicorn reserves in protected forests where these shy creatures can live without fear of being hunted for their valuable horns, tails, and blood. There are areas designated for hippogriff breeding, managed by specialists who understand the complex social structures and breeding requirements of these creatures. There are even government-run facilities that care for rescued creatures, particularly those that have been injured or orphaned, nursing them back to health and, when possible, returning them to the wild. The International Confederation of Wizards has established laws designed to protect magical creatures worldwide. The International Statute of Secrecy, enacted in 1692, requires each magical government to take responsibility for concealing and controlling the magical creatures within its borders, ensuring they don't reveal themselves to muggles. Clause 73 of this statute, added in 1750, makes each government accountable to the international community if a creature in their territory causes a breach of secrecy or harms muggles. This has led to better creature management, though it has also sometimes resulted in creatures being killed when perhaps relocation would have been more appropriate. The ban on experimental breeding, which Hagrid violated with its blast-ended scroots, exists to prevent the creation of dangerous new species that might escape control and pose threats to the wizarding or muggle worlds. While this law can seem restrictive to those interested in pushing the boundaries of magazoological knowledge, it serves an important protective function. After all, what if the Scroots had proven capable of reproduction? What if they had escaped into the wild and established breeding populations? The potential for disaster is clear. Yet, despite all these laws and all these efforts, the relationship between wizards and magical creatures remains complex and sometimes troubled. Dragons are still poached for their valuable blood, hide, and bone. Acromantula venom, while illegal to trade, commands high prices on the black market. Even hippogriff feathers are sought after for their use in certain potions, leading to illegal hunting in some areas. The tension between those who see magical creatures as resources to be exploited and those who see them as beings deserving of protection and respect remains a defining conflict in the wizarding world. Hagrid represents one side of this conflict, the side that argues for compassion, understanding, and coexistence. He has spent his life proving that even the most dangerous creatures can be managed, even befriended, if approached with respect and patience. He has taken in creatures that others wanted to destroy, giving them homes and care when they had nowhere else to go. He has taught generations of students that fear of the unknown should be replaced with curiosity, and that understanding a creature's nature is the first step toward living alongside it safely. The future of magical creature conservation depends on people like Hagrid, on those willing to get their hands dirty, to risk injury or worse, to see beyond society's prejudices and form genuine connections with beings that most would rather ignore or destroy. It depends on continued education, on teaching young witches and wizards that magical creatures are not merely obstacles or resources, but fellow inhabitants of this world, deserving of consideration and care. It depends on laws that protect rather than merely restrict, on sanctuaries that provide genuine havens rather than simply prisons, on a worldview that values diversity and wildness, rather than seeking to control or eliminate what we don't fully understand. As we approach the end of our time together tonight, as the fire burns low in Hagrid's hut and the stars wheel slowly overhead, let us take a moment to reflect on everything we've learned. We've journeyed from the birth of a half-giant boy who would grow up to bridge two worlds, through the history of dragons whose scales shimmer with every color imaginable and whose fire could melt stone. We've met Fluffy and Aragog, Buckbeak, and the Thestrals, each remarkable in their own way. each teaching us something about loyalty, respect, and the bonds that can form across seemingly impossible divides. We've walked through the forbidden forest, hearing the whispers of its ancient trees and the rustling of creatures in the undergrowth. We've considered the strange and controversial blast-ended scroots, those products of Hagrid's experimental spirit and willingness to try things others wouldn't dare. We've examined the Ministry's classification system and seen its strengths and limitations. And we've reflected on the ongoing work of conservation, the effort to ensure that magical creatures will continue to exist for future generations. What have we learned from all of this? Perhaps the most important lesson is the one Hagrid has been teaching throughout his life, that there is no such thing as a truly evil creature, only creatures that are feared because they are misunderstood. Every dragon, every acromantula, every hippogriff and thestral has its own nature, its own needs and behaviors. Some are dangerous, yes, but danger and evil are not the same thing. A dragon breathes fire, because that is what dragons do, not because it bears malice toward wizards. An acromantula might hunt humans because humans are made of meat and the spider is hungry, not because it has a personal vendetta. Understanding this distinction, seeing creatures as they truly are, rather than as we fear them to be, is the foundation of successful creature care and conservation. We've also learned that size and strength do not determine a creature's value or its capacity for friendship. Hagrid, who stands nearly twice the height of an ordinary man and 5 times as wide, is gentle and kind, while many smaller wizards harbor cruelty in their hearts. Aragog was a giant spider whose offspring would happily devour a human, yet he maintained a genuine friendship with Hagrid for more than 50 years. Buckbeak, fierce enough to slash Draco Malfoy's arm when insulted, was loyal enough to risk his life to save Sirius Black. The Thestrals, associated with death and often feared, are actually gentle creatures willing to carry students hundreds of miles to help them on their quest. Appearances deceive, and those who judge based on surface impressions miss the truth beneath. We've learned, too, that breaking rules is sometimes necessary when the rules themselves are unjust. Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts for a crime he didn't commit, yet he continued to practice magic, using his broken wand, because some things are more important than blindly following regulations. He kept Aragog alive when the Ministry wanted the spider destroyed, and decades later it became clear that this monster was capable of loyalty and even love. He rescued Buckbeak from an unjust execution, and that Hippogriff went on to fight bravely in the Battle of Hogwarts. Laws and classifications have their place, but compassion and individual judgment matter more than any regulation ever could. As you drift towards sleep now, feeling the warmth of the fire and the comfort of this safe space, imagine yourself standing at the edge of the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid beside you. The moon is rising, full and bright, casting silver light through the trees. In the distance you can hear the soft calls of nighttime creatures, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of something moving through the undergrowth. The air smells of pine and earth, of life in all its wild complexity. Hagrid gestures toward the forest, and you notice movement in the shadows. A thestral steps into a patch of moonlight, its skeletal form somehow beautiful in the pale light, its white eyes shining. Then another appears, and another, until a small herd stands before you, patient and calm. They do not shy away. They simply stand, waiting, trusting. Hagrid reaches out one enormous hand and strokes the neck of the nearest thestral, and the creature leans into his touch, closing its eyes in contentment. He turns to you and smiles, that familiar warm smile that crinkles the corners of his eyes. "Not so scary when you get to know 'em," he says softly. "None of 'em are, really. They're just looking to live their lives in peace. Same as us. All they want is a bit of respect, a bit of understanding, and someone who sees them for what they really are. In the distance you hear a sound that might be a dragon's roar, echoing from somewhere in the mountains beyond the forest. It's a lonely sound, powerful and ancient, the voice of a creature that has existed since before humans built their first castle or wrote their first spell. There's danger in that sound, yes, but there's majesty too, and freedom, and a wild beauty that no law, or classification can capture. Hagrid hears it too, and his expression grows wistful. Beautiful, in it, he murmurs. Sometimes I think about Norberta. Wonder if she's up there somewhere, breathing fire and flying free. I hope she is. I hope she's happy. The Thestrals begin to move, walking back into the forest in their silent, graceful way, disappearing into the shadows from which they came. The night grows quieter, more peaceful. The stars above seem brighter now, and you can make out constellations. The dragon, the centaur, the unicorn, creatures written in the stars themselves, as if the universe knows that such beings deserve to be remembered, celebrated, and protected. You feel deeply relaxed, your breathing slow and steady, your body heavy and comfortable. All the concerns of the day have faded away, replaced by a sense of wonder and peace. Hagrid begins walking back toward his hut, and you follow, feeling safe in his presence, knowing that this enormous man with his kind heart would never let any harm come to you. You reach the hut, and he opens the door, letting the warmth and firelight spill out into the night. Fang is inside, still snoring on his rug, and the kettle is whistling softly on the fire. Hagrid pours 2 cups of tea and hands you one, the cup enormous, but somehow just right in your hands. You sit by the fire, feeling its warmth, hearing the wood crackle and pop, smelling the comforting scent of tea and wood smoke. Thanks for listening, Hagrid says quietly. Not everyone wants to hear about creatures, but I reckon they're worth talking about. Worth caring about. The world's a better place when we've got dragons in it, when we've got hippogriffs and thestrals and even acromantulas. Strange as that might sound, takes all sorts to make a world. And the magical sorts are just as important as any other. You nod, too comfortable and too drowsy to speak, but he understands. He's always understood. Outside, the night is still and calm, the forest breathing slowly in its sleep, its creatures settling in for the night. Inside, the fire burns lower, the light growing softer, more golden. Your eyes grow heavy and you let them close, just for a moment, just to rest. When you open them again, you're in your own bed, safe and warm. Though you can still smell wood smoke and feel the warmth of that fire, you can still hear Hagrid's voice rumbling and kind, telling stories of dragons and hippogriffs, of loyalty and understanding. The memories of the Forbidden Forest, the sight of the Thestrals in the moonlight, the sound of that distant dragon's roar, all of it stays with you as you drift deeper into sleep, carrying you gently toward dreams. Before you go completely, one final thought drifts through your mind, Hagrid's words echoing softly. They're just looking to live their lives in peace, same as us. In the morning, when you wake, you might remember these stories, or you might not. But somewhere in your heart, you'll carry forward the lesson Hagrid has spent his life teaching, that understanding is stronger than fear, that compassion can bridge any divide, and that even the most fearsome creatures can show gentleness when treated with respect. That is Hagrid's legacy, and it is one worth remembering. If you enjoyed this journey into Hagrid's world, please do consider subscribing to our channel for more restful explorations of the magical and mysterious. Leave a like if these stories brought you comfort or taught you something new. And share this with others who might need a peaceful escape, who might benefit from learning, as we have, that the world is full of wonders if only we take the time to see them clearly. For now, though, let yourself rest. Let the stories settle in your mind like gentle snow, covering everything in softness and peace. Let the image of dragons soaring through moonlit skies carry you toward your own dreams. Let Hagrid's kindness and the loyalty of his creatures remind you that there is goodness in this world, connections worth making, beauty worth protecting. Sleep well, dear friend. The creatures of the Forbidden Forest watch over you tonight, and in Hagrid's world, that means you are safe. Good night.